Says we are live. No, I don't see it. Hey, good afternoon, guys. It is Whiskey Wednesday. This is the Spirits Guy coming to you guys live. Wachusett Wine and Spirits out here in West Boylston. I am in Mask. The town of West Boylston has issued mask mandate that all indoor retail required to wear masks if you're coming in the store, and staff wearing masks. I'm in a bubble here, nobody near me, nobody within 10 feet of me, so that's why I'm going to lose the mask so that I can talk to you. Please understand, people, that this is not our rule. It is what the town has asked us to enforce, and so we're just doing kind of what we're told. Hey, there we are, we're live. Awesome. So yeah, we're just doing what we're told, not our rules. We're asking, we're suggesting, whatever, but we are back in mask mode. A couple of things before we get to the cool whiskeys that we have in front of us. It is Bourbon Heritage Month, so we're going to be talking about bourbon every Wednesday for the rest of the month. We're going to be doing some flash sales on bourbons. You'll see those pop up on Facebook as we go through. What else do we have to announce? As you guys saw last week, we did our Virginia Distilling single barrel pick of Portwood finish. And then I found out yesterday that Amanda Beckwith from Virginia Distilling is actually coming up to hang out here, check out the store. Maybe we'll get some live video on that. We're trying to nail down the date and the time. But it looks like she will actually be here in the store. For me personally, super exciting. Can't wait for that. I talked to my friends Rachel and my new friend Rich from Heaven Hill. The process is getting started to have Wachusett Wine and Spirits here certified as a bottled in bond store. I can't wait for that. More details to follow on that. What else we got? Hey, it's coming up on that time of year. Bourbon season. We see the joke sort of chalkboard that I have when you guys walk in the door. About 0 days since anybody's asked for Blanton's, Buffalo Trace, Eagle Rare, E.H. Taylor. We're getting into that time of year where all the quote-unquote cool, quote-unquote allocated whiskeys are going to start to roll in. Here's the deal. We spend all year long building relationships, buying products, making friendships, making connections with my friends at Luxco and our friends at Sazerac and Buffalo Trace, and buying Old Forester, Yellowstone. We go through a lot of effort every year to try and maybe potentially get our hands on some of these rare bottles. By the way, plenty of allocated whiskeys in stock already. That Remus Repeal Reserve, which right now is currently the best whiskey I've tasted this year, we've been able to almost corner the market on it. Highly allocated because of the amount of Rebel that we sell and the amount of George Remus regular bourbon that we brought in. I was able to get access to a lot of that. I don't just get to call up again and order this stuff. There's a lot of hoops that we have to jump through, and sales reps, distributors, wholesalers, distilleries, all the way up the ladder, hold everybody to the fire, and at every sort of rung on the ladder, there's a puppet master that from Buffalo Trace says, this much will go here, this much will go here. And then when it hits here, somebody there goes, oh, this much will go to this distributor, this much will go to this distributor. And then from that distributor, they go, this sales rep gets this much, and this sales rep gets this much. I can ask for it. I'm also at the mercy of sales reps who have to go to their bosses, to the people who do the allocation to them, and I'm at the mercy of them advocating for me. So it's not just as simple as, hey, can I get some Blanton's? I know how much the distributor got in this month. It is a ridiculously less than 5 cases for the distributor to be spread out over 7 sales reps, and then those 7 sales reps each have 40, 50 accounts each. So they're literally doling out bottles. It's just not that easy to come by. That being said, we love putting these great whiskeys in the hands of great people. We have to support the brands, so we're looking for that support from the customers. If you are that customer that walks in, asks me if I have Blanton's, I say no, because we don't have any in stock right now. And you turn around and you have no interest in anything else that we carry or that we do, or building a relationship, or building a friendship, or being part of this family that we are developing of spirits lovers, it's going to be a little bit harder to come by. We have to put the effort in, and we're looking for some of that effort as well. That being said, when they do come out, anything that we have available, we put out on the shelf. We haven't had any Blantons to put out on the shelf in a while, but when we do, we put it out on the shelf. There is no secret back room. We don't hide anything. When we get it, we get it. And that's sort of it. So please, don't call and ask me if we have Birthday Bourbon. Come in, shop, talk to me. If it's come in and hasn't hit the shelf yet, I'll tell you. But yeah, it just doesn't work as easy as me being able to call up and order unlimited amounts. And that's why you don't see this stuff sort of out there on the shelf everywhere. Sometimes you might see it at some of the bigger box stores because they have a national sort of sales connection. I get it. We can't fight that. That being said, if you want good whiskey, we have so much good whiskey. I am tasting things constantly, bringing things in, flushing things out, always trying to keep our selection fresh, new. Yeah, lots of good whiskey here. Lots of allocated whiskey here. Maybe not a lot of the status whiskeys, but a lot of great, great whiskeys. There it is. It's my rant. Because it is whiskey sort of allocation season. And here we go. Here at the task at hand, it is Bourbon Heritage Month. It's the month where we celebrate bourbon, America's true spirit, as decreed by law in 1964. If we're going to celebrate the heritage of bourbon, there is no better, more appropriate brand to celebrate it with than Old Forester. Old Forester is the oldest continuously run brand of bourbon of all the brands of bourbon. When we talk about Buffalo Trace, you're talking 25, 30 years of heritage. Pappy Van Winkle, who was in charge of the Stitzelweller distillery, but they never actually made Pappy Van Winkle at that distillery. Pappy Van Winkle as a brand is what, 20, 25 years old, maybe max. Four Roses is a brand that kind of changed ownership and went in and out and had some kind of ups and downs. They've been around for a while. Maker's Mark since maybe the 40s or 50s. A lot of those brands are post-Prohibition. They were shut down during Prohibition. Old Forester is the only brand of bourbon produced before Prohibition, during Prohibition, and post-Prohibition, all under the same ownership. It's absolutely amazing. As a bartender, we've always known how great this bourbon was. Their parent company, Brown Forman, George Garvin Brown was the founder. They also own Jack Daniels. They also own Woodford Reserve. Maybe sometimes this got lost in the shuffle as far as status, But as far as quality, consistency, it has always been a fantastic brand, and we have always known that. The brand starts in 1870. There's a lot of firsts involved in the brand. And again, during Prohibition, they were license number 3 out of the 6 that were granted, out of the 10 that were available, to continue to produce medicinal whiskey during Prohibition, still under the same family ownership. They're still owned by the same family. They're still owned by the Brown family over 150 years later. They have always been dedicated to consistency and quality. And we'll see that as we get into the history. And then in recent history, a woman named Jackie Zykan came into the picture of Old Forester. She is their master taster, and she is sort of the brains and the innovator behind this sort of expansion of Old Forester into these other cool bottlings. So basically, not only are they the heritage brand, but they have bottlings that tell the story of the heritage of Old Forester. Now, I have some notes like I always do, because as much as I think I know about these things, I always like to take a little deeper dive, share some info, share some stories. All of this goes into our blog post. Kind of when the video's done, these blogs all go up on our website. There'll be links in the website through the blog post that you can buy these directly in our online store, pick them up curbside. As COVID stuff starts to get a little weirder, if you don't want to come in the store and shop, if you want to stay safe and stay distant, you can order online. If you just go to the Wachusett Wine and Spirits website, there's an order online, or you can go to the blog post. Again, we'll bring you right to these links. You can pay for it online. You can have a pretty much touchless transaction. Call us when you get here. We'll bring it out to you. So where the story starts of this, and I want to kind of give away mash bill too. 72% corn, 18% rye, 10% barley. Kind of in the range of what a lot of people do. Their whiskeys don't carry age statements because, as they like to say, the whiskey ages until it's ready. Now, one thing that they do that most distilleries don't do is they heat cycle their warehouses. Most distilleries, their rick houses, are naturally temperature kind of, they get the nature's sort of temperature where it's really hot in the summer, it's really cold in the winter. These guys sort of heat cycle, temperature control their warehouse for a little bit more consistency from barrel to barrel. That's actually a technique that was developed by Colonel E.H. Taylor, Edmund Haynes Taylor, who was the guy behind the bottled in bond bill, and is the name behind a brand that people ask us for every single day. So that's why you don't see age stated. Old Forester is because their belief is when the whiskey's ready, the whiskey is ready, and that's it. So 1870, the brand starts with George Garvin Brown. Now George Garvin Brown, make sure I'm going in the right direction. George Garvin Brown was a pharmaceutical sales rep. Dr. Forester was a Civil War surgeon who was pretty famous in Louisville. And his name was spelt with 2 R's, Forrester. And he allowed them to use his name as sort of an indication of quality. And at that time, whiskey was believed to be medicinal. I still believe that it's medicinal. It certainly makes me feel better at the end of my day. So it was named after, according to their website, Dr. Forester. And then when Dr. Forester retired, they dropped one of the R's out of the name to kind of eliminate that link because he wasn't in practice anymore, and to kind of get away from those medicinal claims that whiskey was making. So, this is what is called the Whiskey Row Series. Old Forester makes all these whiskeys. We have the 86 proof and the 100 proof. We'll talk about those, how they came to be. The Normandy Rye that they bottle under their name now. And then the Whiskey Row Series, which is kind of the story and the history of Old Forester. So 1870, George Garvin Brown creates this brand. At that time, there was a lot of inferior whiskeys. Distilleries would make whiskey, they would barrel it, and then they would sell it to what was known as rectifiers, or people who ran general stores. The problem is the brand, which would go on the barrel head, might say Jim Beam on it, but when it gets to the general store, that store owner might dilute it with tobacco spit, paint thinner, whatever. Different things to kind of stretch it out and get 2 barrels out of 1. George Garvin Brown realized that's not good for your brand. It diminishes the reputation and the integrity of your brand. So Old Forester is the first brand to bottle its own bourbon. They were the first ones to put their own bourbon in a bottle, put a seal over the top, and that was a way to ensure quality and protect the name of Old Forester. So 1870 not only represents the year that the brand was created, but when the brand was created, George Garvin Brown was sourcing his whiskey from 3 different distilleries in Kentucky. I want to make sure I got them right. The Mattingly Distillery, the Atherton Distillery, and the Melwood Distillery. So he would blend them together for consistency and quality. So in homage to that, the 1870 of the Whiskey Row Series is a blend of whiskeys that are sourced from 3 different rickhouses that Old Forester owns. So it's all their own juice, but they have rickhouses in different counties. They blend whiskey from these 3 sort of in homage. This is bottled at 90 proof because that's the proof that Old Forester was originally bottled at. Right on the nose, you get that signature Old Forester sour cherry, and spice, and oak. Sweet, soft, toasty, a little smoky on the finish. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. The next important date in sort of that Old Forester heritage comes up in 1897. Now this is where Colonel Edmund Haynes Taylor, working with Secretary John Carlisle, they come up with the Bottled in Bond Act. Because again, rectifiers were taking these whiskeys, they were diluting them down. They came up with a law that guaranteed the purity of the whiskey, which basically says that if you're going to bottle it, it has to be aged for a minimum of 4 years in a government supervised warehouse made by 1 distillery in 1 distilling season. So that means that all the whiskey is made between January 1st and June 30th, or July 1st and December 31st. It's made in that 6-month window of the year. So basically it just ensures that all that whiskey kind of comes from the same spot. It has to be bottled at 100 proof. There's Peter Thomas. So, what Old Forester did is basically what they've been doing all along, which was they were bottling their own whiskey. But at this point, in order to maintain that 1 distillery element of that Bottled in Bond Act, George Garvin Brown went out and bought the Mattingly Distillery so that all that whiskey could come from 1 distillery. They raised their proof point from 90 to 100, and that's what the 1897 is here to represent. Comes from 1 distillery, one distilling season, 4 years, bottled at 100. And for the longest time, the 1910 was sort of my favorite. And then I cracked this last night. I thought, man, that 100 proof point, which to me is the perfect proof point. And people ask, like, what's the difference between the bottled and bond 100 proof and the regular, what they call the signature 100 proof? It's proof point. This has got a longer finish and a little bit more body to it. But if you want a great example of what Old Forester 100 proof is at a little less money, certainly crack a bottle of the signature. Again, that big sort of cherry nose. This is more like a cherry pie to me. It's cherry pie with that sort of bready, toasty crust. Almost a little burnt on the crust. Nice and crispy. So you get some of that smokiness to it. That is absolutely a flawless whiskey. It may be one of my favorite bottled and bond offerings. It's kind of hard to say because I'm such a bottled and bond nut, but I am in love with that. So from 1897, we go up to 1910. I haven't even cracked this one yet. So in 1910, what happens is this. They have a batch of whiskey that's ready to be bottled. And I've been down to Kentucky. I've actually been to the bottling lines. And really, the art of great bourbon, most people don't think of it, is truly the art of blending. That barrels from different areas of the rickhouse are going to give you different characteristics. 4-year bourbon is going to be a little different than 6-year bourbon. So getting the ages and the proportions and the ratios right on a consistent basis. You know, we talk about brands, you know, people think of Jack Daniels, you know, they make so much of it, and it's so, it is what it is. Understand, to get that sort of consistent flavor over that many hundreds of thousands of cases, every bottle of Jack Daniels tasting exactly the same, that's not by accident. And they don't make it 1 million gallons at a time. They all still go into 55-gallon barrels. There's probably 45 gallons left in that barrel by the time they dump it. And still they're able to maintain consistent flavor. That is no accident. That is an art. That is brilliance by any master blender, master distiller, master taster. Those people have the term master in their title for a reason. They are beyond what I can comprehend of how they're able to do that consistently. So in 1910, what happens is when you go to bottle a batch of whiskey, you take 500,000, 2,000, 5,000, however many barrels go into your batch. Dump all those barrels into one vat. That vat will then feed the bottling line, and you get your consistent bottles. Man, this is so good. So in 1910, they had a batch of whiskey. They're getting ready to bottle. And then there's a fire at the bottling plant. So they have to get the whiskey out of the plant. And what they did was they managed to get all that whiskey back into brand new oak barrels. They forget about it because they put it off to the side. They work on the bottling line. Probably 7-8 months later, they remember, oh, we have all this whiskey in these barrels. Let's see what happened to it. So they crack it open, they taste it, and they're just blown away. This is fantastic whiskey, but it doesn't taste like Old Forester. And their whole objective is quality, consistency. And as great as it wasn't Old Forester because of that second barreling. So they did a one-time release at that time, and they called it Old Fine Whiskey. So it's kind of cool. on the 1897, you see that stamp, bottled in bond. You see original batch. And on this one, you see Old Fine Whiskey. That was the name of the whiskey that it was bottled as. This was recreated. This was actually the last one created in the series. And according to Jackie Zykan, there will be no more created in this series. It is just these 4. This is the most recent. So in homage to that time, which, by the way, is credited as being the first double-barreled whiskey, at least in America. So when you guys see Woodford Reserve Double Oak, the inspiration for that, coincidentally, Woodford being owned by Brown Forman, which owns this, the inspiration for that Double Oak project comes from that 1910 Old Fine whiskey. So in homage, they take their regular Old Forester whiskey, and then they put it in a new barrel. The initial barrel is a low char, and then they char it twice as much for the second barrel. So it gets a deeper, darker flavor. It then rests for about 7 to 9 months after the initial aging process. And this is bottled at 93 proof. I quite honestly don't have the info on that, why they picked that proof point. But it does make sense with Jackie Zykan. I know from listening to podcasts and reading interviews that her flavor palette tends to be a little bit lower proof. That's just what she likes. And she's one hell of a bartender, cocktail artist. So it would make sense 93 is a good spot for cocktails as well. The color on that, it's just so dark. Because again, you're getting that secondary aging in that heavily charred barrel. So this, if you took those chocolate-covered cherries that you get at Christmas time, there's more chocolate, mocha, molasses, more dark flavors, and yet that Old Forester signature cherry bomb is right underneath that. And I will say, you know, for 93 proof, which is nothing bashful about it, but it's got a bigger mouthfeel than 93 proof. It's richer. It's almost like Hershey syrup kind of chocolate to it. Yeah, this is one of my favorite all-time bottlings of whiskey. And in the Whiskey Row series, that brings us up to the final one, which is the 1920 batch. So, for any of you sort of bourbon nerds, spirit nerds, so much of our spirit culture, so much of our American culture, the way the whole liquor industry is set up, not only here in Massachusetts, but across the country, and maybe the ultimate butterfly ripple effect across the world. In 1920, the most important year in the history of spirits happens, and that is Prohibition, which basically banned the sale of whiskey and any other spirits in this country. That brought a rise of spirits coming in from Canada and Scotland and Ireland, other spirits coming up from Mexico. This was pre-1964. People were making bourbon in Mexico and in France and other parts of the world. Prohibition, the most important historical time in the whole spirits industry. Now again, there were 10 medicinal licenses offered by the federal government for the purposes of making whiskey for medicinal reasons, which kind of ties into our recent fascination with the George Remus line and the Remus repeal. George Remus was the king of the bootleggers during Prohibition. 10 licenses were offered. What's mind-blowing to me is only 6 of them were actually applied for. And off the top of my head, I don't remember the names of all 6s because a lot of those names have changed. This is the only one that is still the same as it was during Prohibition. So these guys were actually making whiskey during Prohibition. Now, at that point, they were going to barrel at 100 proof. I can't even imagine that, because now they go to barrel at 140, actually 125. You can distill to 160. They were going to barrel at 100 proof. Through the angel share, which is the evaporation of water and alcohol, depending on the location in the warehouse, their barrels were gaining proof. So they were losing more water than alcohol, so they were coming out of the barrel at 115. Hence, this is what this one is bottled at, the Prohibition style Old Forester at 115. Now I know that there are a lot of people out there that this is actually their favorite of the Whiskey Row because of that higher proof point. Yeah, we get some people out there watching. It's pretty cool. Thank you, anybody who's out there watching. We appreciate it. But if you guys are missing Corey, hopefully next week he'll be back. He's actually got to work for once in a while. Yeah, 1910 and 1920 are everybody's sort of 1A and 1B, and a lot of people go back and forth between which one they like. The whiskey drinkers who like that high proof obviously like the 1920. If you like that smoother, richer flavor, you like the 1910. I think the shame of it is a lot of people overlook the 1897. The 117 series is a distillery-only release. Kind of circle around back to that. Much like President's Choice is only available at the distillery. I will say, because, again, from the beginning of my video here in my rant, we're building a family here of spirits, people, that so many of these people that I interact with, that I am blessed to interact with, people like Peter Thomas, people like Kevin Rhoda, and Jason, and Jeremy, and so many of you guys out there, Derek, who came by to see me today, that we're developing this sort of family and these friendships, that my friend Jeremy actually had a bottle of the first release of the 117, and I did get to try that. It's worth the hype. It's pretty fantastic. And honestly, guys, sometimes that's the only way I get to try these things, is when I sell a customer a birthday bourbon, and without asking, they come back and share it, because for this sort of group of people, that's what it's all about. It's not only, it's not about collecting and having status. It's, I want to get my hands on it so that I can share it with all my friends. So I have got to taste the 117. It's pretty fantastic, but everything I know about it is that it's only available at the distillery. It is the Jackie Zykan 117 Angel Share, I do believe they call it, or something Share. And I believe the original distillery was located at 117 on Whiskey Row, kind of near where they are. And yeah, it is the first one to feature a woman's signature, which is Jackie Zykan's. That is her, yeah, that's her baby and her pet project as well. So that higher proof cuts through some of that cherry. It's still there, you're just not getting as much sweet cherry. But it is still a big, big cherry bomb. Any of these whiskeys, any of the Old Forester whiskeys, if you guys are cocktail nuts, like I know Peter is out there. Old Fashions with Old Forester using cherry bitters is mind-blowingly good. I sometimes feel like cherry bitters were created to make Old Fashions with Old Forester. Yeah, it is that good. And since I've got these all open, I've never actually done this. But there is a big thing out there in the whiskey community where people are blending the 1910 and the 1920 together to make what they're calling the 1950. So I'm going to add a little bit of 1910 to my 1920. Get a little, Gary Vaynerchuk would say, a little swirly swirl there. Give it a little sniffy sniff. I don't know if anybody out there gets the Vaynerchuk reference. Interesting. Mixed together, I almost get like a little bit of butterscotch on the nose there. All right, I get it. So these two blended together. If you could picture, man, Thanksgiving, cherry pie, lattice top, big dollop of melting vanilla ice cream on there with some caramel drizzle. That's what that is. That is fantastic. That's fantastic like that. I kind of want to go home and make an old fashioned using both of those and maybe some chocolate bitters, some cherry bitters. Yeah, wow. Yeah, Kevin, I'm with you. It's hard to choose between the 1920, 1910, and I'm not sure why we have to. We live in a world where we can have both. So, just kind of close in on the Whiskey Row series here with our sort of 3-tier rating system. Are these whiskeys good? Hell yes. These whiskeys are all fantastic. Is the packaging good? The packaging is, I think the packaging is stellar. It's classic. They've actually revamped the labels. They're a little tighter, a little bit cleaner. But I love these labels. Does it start a story? Does it start a conversation? Absolutely. If somebody walks into your house, sees that on your bar, they're going to ask you what it is. If you've got the time and the money to invest and collect all 4 of these as a set, does that start a conversation on your bar? Without a doubt. Not only does it start a conversation, but it tells a story of one of the first corporations in America. It tells the story of the longest running bourbon brand at over 150 years. It tells a story of sort of the evolution of whiskey and bourbon in Kentucky. Yeah, Kevin, the label's a little bit shorter. The 1920 is the first one that we have on the shelf with that little bit tighter label, but the juice is just as good. By the way, as a fun little fact, when they first launched the 1910, they made what they thought would be enough 1910 to satisfy a year-long demand. When we bought in pretty heavy on it. And they sold out in 60 days. They so far just outsold their expectations. And so it was a long time that it was out of stock. And now they're sort of back in the pipeline where they shouldn't have any more stock issues. But that's how well this was received when it first hit the market. They put out a year's supply, gone in 60 days. Most states never even saw that initial batch of the 1910. That's how well it was received right out of the gate. So that is our Whiskey Row series. Now I want to come across and just sort of show you the true history, some other important dates in the history of this brand. In 1941, they were the first distillery, right after the attack on Pearl Harbor, when distilleries had to start making alcohol, industrial alcohol for the war. They were the first distillery to completely convert to industrial alcohol for the war effort. Completely convert. They were the first ones. In 1945, they bought a furniture company in Kentucky. They converted it to a cooperage because their goal in maintaining and owning the quality of the brand was they wanted to own the distillation, they wanted to own the barrels, and they wanted to own the rick houses. So they controlled the making and the aging and the bottling of their product as a way of ensuring that they controlled everything, the quality. So that cooperage they still own today. It's known as the Brown-Forman Cooperage today. 1951, when bourbon sales were starting to go down, they were actually the first ones to put them in those cool, fancy decanters that are so collectible now. Mike Connell, so good to hear from you. Hope you are doing well. Yeah, I agree. 1920 should be on everybody's bar, as should 1910. And in general, you should have an Old Forester whiskey on your home bar. Just in general, great for cocktails, great for sipping. As I get sidetracked here, George Garvin Brown's half-brother, J.T.S. Brown, who was the guy that he started the company with, would end up having a whiskey named after him, made by Heaven Hill. And no, this is not available in Massachusetts. This was brought up by a friend, and I'm not even sure that they make this anymore. But this is the J.T.S. Brown bottled in bond, so 4-year, 100 proof bourbon, made at Heaven Hill. I believe this is a discontinued item. So if you're in other states where this is available and you see this, grab it. It's going to be a collector's item. Or, like everything else that was good and affordable, it'll vanish and then come back at $40 more expensive. How that works, I don't know. So yeah, 1951, they're the first ones to put it in a decanter. In 1959, they introduce the 86 proof. At that point, we were getting into cocktails and bar culture again, really for the first time since pre-Prohibition. And people were looking for lighter spirits. So they dropped the proof down to 86 to accommodate that sort of flavor profile. And then later on, they would introduce the 100 proof, which is known as the Old Forester Signature. One of these should be on your bar. Now, if you've never had Old Forester and you're curious about that flavor profile, what's great is the 86 proof comes in 50 mLs. I have tried to do a better job here of bringing in some higher quality 50 ml bottles, nips, samplers, shots, whatever you want to call them. They're not always designed to just rip shots of. Sometimes they're actually designed so that you guys can taste it in this size for a smaller investment before you decide I want to buy the big bottle. I know my friend Jeremy, when they go kayaking, this is what they bring with them. But yeah, we have Old Forester, the 86 proof in 50 mLs all day, every day for you to try. They're definitely a staff favorite here. Now the next date, this was a fun one for me. I was going down the rabbit hole. I always want to find something a little bit interesting that maybe we haven't heard before. In 1962, anybody who's familiar with Old Forester, knows there's a bottling called President's Choice. It gets released once a year. It's a distillery only. When I was down there, and if you ever get to Louisville, right on Whiskey Row, you have to go to the Old Forester Distillery. Most of the whiskey is made out at their Chivoli distillery, but they actually do make whiskey, and they can age about 900 barrels at a time in Louisville, right there on Whiskey Row. That was the unicorn bottle that I wanted, President's Choice. When you walk in, they're kind of dotted all over the place. Not for sale, decoration only. But it was first released in 1962 as a single barrel item that they made it available. You could buy a barrel of Old Forester President's Choice if you bought the whole barrel, thus making it the actual first single barrel product in the industry. Before Blanton's, before Booker's, before Four Roses single barrel, before Evan Williams single barrel, the first single barrel whiskey offered in the industry was actually by Old Forester. So we're talking the first one to bottle their own stuff, the first one to convert to industrial alcohol, the first ones to offer a single barrel. Pretty interesting stuff. In 2002, Birthday Bourbon was first released. It is an annual, highly sought after, highly allocated whiskey. Comes out every year. It's a different blend, different ages, different proof points. It is released to celebrate the birthday of George Garvin Brown. Last year saw the release of the 150 series to commemorate the 150-year anniversary of Old Forester. In 2014, the Whiskey Row series started to come out, concluding with, I think, 2019 when 1910 came out. In 1940, to kind of swing around, Brown-Forman bought a brand called Normandy Rye, as well as a couple other brands. And in 2019, they revived that Normandy Rye as Old Forester Rye, with a mash bill of 65% rye, 15% corn, 20% malted barley. And in the last 2 years, this has become one of my absolute favorite rye whiskeys that we sell here, that we can get anywhere. Yeah, like Peter Thomas says, this is great for old fashions, Manhattans. It's designed, again, Jackie Zykan being a cocktail expert, she's always got that in mind when she's doing these sort of projects. They also make something called the Statesman, which was a partnership with the movie franchise, The Statesman. And while they heat cycle their warehouse for consistency among the barrels, even with that, each barrel ages a little differently. So they cherry pick some barrels. This is bottled at 90 proof. This is an absolutely fantastic whiskey too. I feel like this one gets overlooked, not a lot of love, because people don't know what it is. But it is totally different than anything else, and it is fantastic. Not a lot of it out there. We've got some all day, every day. So yeah, that is it. Wrap it up. Let you guys get back to your evening. So you're out there celebrating Bourbon Heritage Month, drinking something nice. And yeah, we'll be back next week. Not sure what we're going to be doing, but Corey will be back with me. We'll have some more fun. Bring some good stuff. And yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. Like I say on Spirits Guide all the time, I'm humbled that anybody's out there watching, paying attention, enjoying what it is that we're doing. If you like what we're doing, share it, comment, like it, tell a friend about it. If you have any suggestions, things you want to see us talk about, leave a comment. You can email me, rich@wachusettliquors.com. You can message us on the Facebook page. And hey, if you're out there and you want to come do a guest spot and come drink some whiskey with me, hit me up on that, and maybe we can make something work there. Yeah, we'll wrap it from there. We'll see you guys next week. Thank you so much for being there. Cheers.